According to me, we are. Maybe the technical guys can look into that. Okay.
Such as vanilla refresh, myriad, or even the new matcha flavor that everyone's been talking about. Um, and then there are um, smaller modular based projects such as Gamemode4, us, or Vanilla Tweaks. And they have many different data packs that each do fairly small things. Um, and then um, kind of slot into each other in a way that can be taken out. You can pick and choose what you want. Whereas the monolith ones, you kind of just get what you get for the most part. Um, and it may be, you may be wondering, like, which one should I do? So with that, I'll pass it to Beeps to explain more of like what you need for each one.
The echo is if you are in the Discord channel, you have to mute probably the live stream by RX. on your end.
Your separate monolith projects. But other than that, you don't really need anything else. With a
Like Beeps and Rankas just stated, it takes a bit of courage, one could say, to actually get started. However, when you are interested in releasing a data pack, you also have to think about maintaining it for the future. Maybe 5 years ago, that meant you had to do an update every year or every 2 years. 10 years ago, when Gamemode4 started, that meant you had to do an update maybe every year once. With nowadays, with Mojang's update schedule, you have to do multiple updates a year to keep up with them, because random things about your data pack break. So maintenance is a big part of data pack development these days, and you have to keep that in mind, and you should keep that in mind when you choose the structure of your project. So what does monolith maintenance mean? So let's say you build a monolith because it's easier. It's easier to add on to it and to keep going. But now Mojang brings out an update and you have to tinker with it. So you take your hammer and swing at your monolith. What happens? Suddenly you find out your monolith breaks apart. In software development, we call this that a monolith usually has high coupling, which is great for features. You want high coupling. The advantages of a monolith are everything is in one thing. So all the features can interact very nicely. If you think about the big monolith packs out there, for example, Myriad, what used to be the Creeper's Code, there's lots of interactions between the features. It integrates with itself beautifully, which is great, but also it creates high coupling. So you touch one feature and suddenly 5 other things break. Some of you might actually know this from the Minecraft codebase itself. Minecraft has this problem. They touch one thing and something else breaks. And you have this very low cohesion. So it's very easy in Monolith to write a piece of code to fix one problem in one spot, and then write another piece of code to kind of fix the same problem again, but in another place. And that makes maintenance of monoliths harder, not impossible. You can see projects like Myriad or Vanilla Refresh are possible, but they become hard, and especially regarding our today with why has it become a co-op game in Gamemode4's case, it becomes very daunting. It's very hard for someone to step in and help updating in that case. So in contrast, our maintenance approach, at Gamemode4 we do it the following way. Let's say this unnamed developer here wants to do something to a Gamemode4 data pack. It's just a little module, so the unnamed developer takes a copy of it, makes their changes, and I am aware that you can also do this, of course, with a monolith. Git is a thing that also works with monoliths, but what comes now is after the changes were made, we go into a review process, in which case, for example, Beeps can review and compare the changes, and then we merge the changes into the main pack. And this merge process does not touch the other parts of the code base. Importantly, this dev who just made these changes to make this blueberry cake feature does not need to know what's going on in the other parts of the project. And with a monolith, you usually need knowledge of the full code base or nearly the full code base to actually understand what's going on and to make changes without breaking something. Also, with modular maintenance, Mizode and the other unnamed dev here, they could do the same thing that the first unnamed dev did at the same time, concurrently. You don't have to wait for each other's features to complete to prevent any collisions or merge conflicts. No, you can work on each byte one at a time at the same time, and players that don't need this blueberry byte, for example, this blueberry cake, and only use the other two modules, they can just keep playing. They don't need to wait for an update for the blueberry cake. And this is the magic of this modular design. It makes it way more approachable. It's also way less daunting to join. If you just want to make a little change at Gamemode4, for example, or vanilla tweaks would also work as a modular pack, you can make a change to a little pack. You don't need to know the full code base. It's very easy, makes it very approachable.
So you're probably wondering, why does Gamemode4 have so many contributors? Well, we found that a modular structure generally leads to more contributors because it's easier. You don't need to know the whole scope of the project, and it's generally easier for new contributors to start working on a module update or even make a new module. I know whenever I joined Gamemode4, close to 2 years ago now, I kind of just went on a blitz through the entire repo and edited so many things, and I was able to do that because so many things were so separate. And in an essence, it kind of turned our massive repository with 86 modules into a co-op game where not one person needs to understand everything, and you can just have little PRs that touch little things, and it won't potentially break everything. Passing on to the next slide, we have some examples for some of our packs that have worked well and have worked poorly for modularization. So I'm passing it off to Beeps next.
Yeah, so liquid tanks is probably our best example of splitting up a large system into a bunch of smaller ones and getting a really good turn of contributors. So if you look to your very right, next to you, you can see a big block of command blocks. So this is the original liquid tanks made by Sparks back in 1.8. As you can see, it's fairly massive, and this was when liquid tanks was all in one module, one large monolith module. So this included the liquid tanks base, and it included standard liquids, and it included potion liquids. So this is what it took to create liquid tanks. And as you can imagine, trying to change one small part of this large command block structure probably was not that easy. And it would lead to issues if you tried to fix one thing, it might break another thing. So back in 1.12, I say we, but it was just one person. If you look on your left side, we split up liquid tanks into a small base. So the small command block structure closest to you guys, that's just the base of liquid tanks. The other two large structures, that is the expansion packs. So we split up liquid tanks into the base, and we allowed expansion packs to build on top of the base. And what that led us to do is, well, now these are data packs. But without this initial split, we probably wouldn't packs that you can see on screen. We wouldn't be able to support new contributors because with the big one, you would have to know how the entire thing works. But with the small one, you just need to know how to make an expansion pack. So you can see over here we have potion liquids, liquid mine carts, cement mixers. These were all made by community members. We have mending tanks, washing tanks. These were all ideas that one person just had, and they could just easily implement it because it was it was easy. It was modular. And then on the right here, you can see we have the last one, Zauber liquids. This one was an expansion pack. It currently does not exist, and I'll let Blue explain why.
Yeah, so you might have gone to this talk thinking that we will tell you that we did everything so great, but we didn't. I mean, we're also just human. We make mistakes. Zauber Liquids, the expansion, doesn't exist. Why does it not exist? Doesn't exist because Zauber Cauldrons is a monolith within Gamemode4. Zauber Cauldrons started off in 2016, actually 2015, when Hermitcraft Gamemode4 happened. A long time ago, Hermitcraft had a cooperation with Gamemode4 where they wanted us to create some command block modules. We did that, and they played a season on this new command block stuff. It was very exciting back then, and I made this little thing called Zauber Cauldrons. Ever since then, it has kind of grown organically. New things were added to it, it grew bigger and bigger. First there was just armor, then other pieces have been removed, then there were upgraded potions in Zauber Cauldrons, portable beacons, later came wormholes, and then to the right here on the right side screen, nowadays you can color your grass with Zauber Cauldrons if you wish to do so as a builder. Feature request by builders, by the way. It's fun, but maintenance for Zauber Cauldrons is a bit of a nightmare. It grew organically as a monolith, and now it's this giant daunting thing that some people call my baby. And the only person that knows the whole code base is no one, because not even I do. I mean, I forget half of it every time I look at it. And hence, Zauber Cauldrons has been sitting there and has been having a lot of issues updating. It hasn't been updated for a couple of versions lately because I didn't have time. Real life kind of got me and I didn't get to update it, and no one else wanted to go in and update it. If you look to your left and to your right, these are the command block versions of Zauber Cauldrons before more features were added to it. So these are actually small compared to today's code base. But, I mean, go in and change one of these command blocks. Good luck finding where it was. And nowadays it's the same thing, but I guess with functions, and there's some weird algorithms in there to make everything look nice. Cool and all, but it's a monolith, and it's our technical debt. Let's look at the opposite of that. Zauber Cauldrons grew organically into a monolith. Let's look at metallurgy. As some of you might notice, back in 2017, this first came out. The official release was then in 2019. Sparks and me came up with this module called metallurgy. Metallurgy is the answer of Gamemode4 to what was then not possible. Then you couldn't make custom enchantments. Gamemode4's answer was this thing called metallurgy. It basically allows you to make custom enchantments, put them on your tools, your armor, and so on. But it was built from the ground up with modularity in mind. So what we designed back then is the metallurgy base, which just allows you to basically make a sort of enchantment table. You kind of cast metals into a blob and so on. It adds some extra metals and you cast them, then you put them under your tools. But the actual enchantments, or we call them shamirs, that you get onto those metal things that you put on your tools, those metal rings, those are all managed by expansions. The base module comes with some pre-installed, because it would kind of suck if you install something as a user and there's no actual features in there, but just tech base. So it comes with some, but to the left and right here, you can see on the side screens, there are lots of expansions that devs later made. So these were, once again, independent contributors that saw the idea of metallurgy, maybe ran into it onto our Gamemode4 public server, liked the idea, had an idea for another shamir or enchantment they could make, and made it into reality. For example, here we have the anime shamir. It's basically like a soul binding enchantment for your tools. There's Audere, which warns you when your tool breaks. There's Fulkio, which allows you to place blocks midair. Iakio allows you to throw stuff stronger, and so on and so forth, yeah? Importantly, these were all made by people separately. And now when we look at the frequency of updates of metallurgy, this module which has been built with this modular approach, making it very approachable for people, versus the frequency of updates for Zauber Cauldrons, you see something that's somewhat stunning, but also, I mean, somewhat obvious. You see in dark gray here, these are all the Zauber updates that have ever been made. So Tauber has been created all the way back here, and there's been one big update, a second big update, a third, and a fourth. So practically there have been 4 Tauber updates ever since Tauber became a thing. That's not so many when you compare that to Metallurgy. Metallurgy, the light blue timeline tags here, there have been so many contributions to Metallurgy, to the Gamemode4 code base with standalone contributions to Metallurgy that people can add on. And the modular approach just straight out wins. It's a lot easier to update these small data packs than to update this giant monolith of Tauber cauldrons. What should also be mentioned is that it's very easy to pass these around. So if the dev of, let's say, the Audere Shamir, the thing that warns you when your tool breaks, when the dev isn't around anymore, it's very easy to bring this bite-sized content to someone else who takes over development. With Tauber Cauldrons, that's not so easy. Mizo did the final update for Tauber Cauldrons to make it, not the final content update, but the final update to make it compatible with Minecraft again. And I think Mizo took like half a year to finally get into it and do it. And that wasn't so nice, because people who had Tauber installed in their world now had to wait forever for Tauber to be updated. They were just waiting there. Whereas with Metallurgy, you pick out your expansions that you want, and if one that you don't have installed anyways isn't updated, you don't care. But if one that you need to wait on isn't updated, it won't take long for it to update, because it's just a little bit of code. It's way easier to keep a concept as a dev, what's going on in it, and I don't know, see how many things there are to do and what there is to do. Whereas with Tauber, it's just a mess, honestly. And that stretches out to other modules too, but with modularity, the problem is that with modularity also comes complexity, and Beeps will tell you a bit about that and his nightmare.
Yeah, so unfortunately, it's not all sunshine and rainbows with the modular systems. Some things are just harder when you have a dynamic set of ever-changing features. So the big example here is the guidebook. This is probably the most technically challenging modules we've made, since it needs to be runtime dynamic. So what this means is whenever you install a new module to your world, the guidebook needs to know when that's installed, and then it needs to update the guidebook that time. With a monolith, you just don't have this issue because you can just make a static guidebook, since the features don't change unless the data pack updates. And at that point, the data pack features change whenever the guidebook updates as well. So you don't have this issue. You don't need to make sure your guidebook lines up with the rest of your modules. You just need to make sure your guidebook stays updated. So the Gamemode4 guidebook, it is modular, but it took us a while to get to this point. This was actually rewritten 3 times, and the first time it was not very modular. It was pretty hard coded. So while we've been raving about this modular structure this entire presentation, just know that while it is nice to split up maintenance, it does make it harder to create these super interwoven mechanics. And then I'll pass it off to Runcows to talk about libraries.
Yeah, so something that became that's not right. There we go. Something that became very apparent with a modular structure like Gamemode4 is that there is a lot of shared systems and common elements, and you don't want to just code these things over and over and over, especially if they're doing the same thing. So you kind of at some point you need to standardize and make libraries. Sometimes the libraries could be in the form of base packs, like base metallurgy, that doesn't have a lot of unique features, but is just the combining, or even liquid tanks, that is just the liquid tanks themselves. But however, sometimes there are more technical, more generic systems that need to be used in multiple places. For instance, on the right here, you can see lib force load, which is our most commonly used library in our repo, and it is used everywhere. There are a few things that use it directly, and all it does is just force load a single chunk out in the middle of nowhere on the edge of the world. And then you use that for multiple different technical things where you need a chunk to be loaded, but no player there, right? So one of those that uses it is libmachines, another library that uses libforceload. And there are so many things in Gamemode4 that use libmachines. And this is just one instance of this, right? Of course, this is our most used library, but you run into this type of thing all the time where one type of thing needs to be used everywhere. And it's easier in some ways to just make one thing that you can implement that will cause everything to use the same thing. And in some cases, you kind of need to for a big modular ecosystem like Gamemode4 because you can't be writing the code multiple times. If you have to update it, then you have to update it everywhere, and it's just kind of a nightmare. So we found that pulling out common systems like this helps massively with maintenance for a modular system, since you only have to update that one common system instead of doing it everywhere all over again. And I tend to see libraries as like the epitome or like the main feature of modular design because you end up with these systems that you have to rely on, like libraries. So passing it back off to Beats.
Yeah, so what's our conclusion? In conclusion, get the next slide. In conclusion, managing modular methods means maintenance moves methodically. Or in other words, Gamemode4 has found that our modular structure has really made maintenance easier. We have a bunch of modules made by different community members, like this could be you in the future, maybe. Issues are easier to track because we can pinpoint to specific modules and we can divide and conquer data pack updates. So we are Gamemode4, and that is how we turned data pack development into a co-op game where a bunch of devs can come and work on a small bit of the project. As always, Gamemode4 is only made possible by our patrons, so we like to give thanks to our patrons on your left side. And then here's our credits on the right side. And as you can see, you can be a part of Gamemode4 if you just make a PR. Thank you. And at this time, thank you for listening. We can take some questions. Oh, and shout out to Beat.
Okay, for questions,
Awesome,
maybe
everyone.
I'll make a start here. If you could move the spotlight over for me. Someone already asked, I don't know who it was, are your libraries downloaded from Modular or Smith? Something that I want to make very clear with these libraries is, in a monolith, first of all, in a monolith you don't need libraries. Why do you not need libraries in a monolith? Because in a monolith everything is included. You can just write it right into your monolith and there's no need to break it out. You wouldn't ever think about breaking it out. Then our libraries, are they downloaded from Modular or Smith? Neither. What comes with the modular approach and why our alternate title was spending years coding pipelines and then ending up with 86 modules of technical debt is that we have pipelines set up on our repo on the backend that automatically compile the libraries and build them into the final build version that you then download. So on your end, the library is never merged into the module. That only happens when the website does its builds. You don't need to download them separately as a user, and we at Gamemode4, we very much do not want to have the user think about that at all. The libraries are a technical aspect, and the user doesn't need to consider them, ideally. Because if you do, then people will miss out on the library and something will not work, and 90% of people will then just go like, ah, shit must be broken, let's just uninstall the data pack.
Yes. In contrast, Our libraries are downloadable on Smith. So if you are a dev and want to use our libraries, that is how you could do that. Okay, I see another question here. Do you think it's worth it for a solo developer to create a highly modular project like Gamemode4? I think I can speak on this since I have done that. I also create a set of Skyblock data packs. So it's called Skyvoid, and I started that just by myself. So I was a solo developer, and since I was coming from Gamemode4, I split up each data pack into a modular system. And this has actually really benefited me because while I started as a solo dev, I'm currently not the only contributor. If you look in my booth, shout out to my booth, Skyvoid, you can see there's three contributors, and each of them have played a different part in the modular system. So while it started with only me, I was able to get two other solo, solo devs to just contribute, and it was really easy for them because of the modular structure of our code base.
Okay, I got another question here, so I'll take the next one. Someone asked, monolithic and modular design can be a spectrum. Even Myriad that you presented as a monolithic data pack is partly modular with its armor trims and how to find the proper balance. Well, I wish I could answer that. The proper balance is somewhere in between. Of course, you don't want to spend years coding pipelines. The way that Gamemode4 has so many pipelines and modules, it kind of grew organically, but not as a monolith, but we started small with this modular approach. The modular approach started small, and only with the big team size we could then manage getting all the pipelines and so on for going the full modular route. If you are a solo dev, like Beeps just stated, the modular approach is still good, but you have to, of course, know your capacities. You want to work on actual content, you don't want to work on just pipelines forever. So find your balance where it feels right to you. Don't waste all the time coding pipelines to make a modular approach work, but think about your future, and when you put time in, think about the fact that you'll have to maintain projects for the future. And then find the balance based on that.
Okay, so next question. What, in
You
your
have the
opinion,
sheet open,
is the
please?
biggest? Yeah, I see it.
Okay.
Next question we have, what, in your opinion, is the biggest downside of modular design? So I think, in my opinion, the biggest downside of modular design is that it takes a lot to create the tools necessary to facilitate the maintenance. So with Gamemode4, since we have a modular approach, we need to make sure each data pack can be downloaded with our base module and our libraries. So those are separate modules in our code base, but as a player, as a user, we want it to be all bundled into one data pack. So what this means is we need to use pipelines and extra code to make sure when we create the data packs, they include the base module, the actual content, and any libraries that it needs. So that is my opinion of the biggest downside of modular design. Maybe Runkhauser Blue has a differing opinion.
Yeah, I have a small addition to make, and that is, you of course do sacrifice some interactivity between your modules. While stuff like Myriad, it's very easy to do interactions between stuff. The modular approach does make you miss out a little bit on interactions, because you can never guarantee that the player has all the modules installed, of course. And at that point, you don't want to sink a lot of time into a lot of interactive code between two modules that might not be installed. Gamemode4 has some interactions. For example, if you install Metallurgy, the diffuse Shamir, which makes creepers not blow up, also makes bats not blow up. Anyone confused? Bats just blow up in Gamemode4. It's been like that forever. It's also a module, and those two interact, but you could have way more interactivity when you just have a monolith.
Something that's related to is another question we got, which is how does modular design affect the inner cohesion of the project? Yeah, you end up having to miss out on some cohesion where you can't have as much interconnectivity because it's not all woven together so tightly. But we also limit ourselves in a way because we run a public server that has most, if not all, of the modules. And so we end up designing from the perspective that all of them are installed. And so it's kind of hard to balance for every single combination of modules installed. So we end up balancing basically just for all of them being there. And then another question is, what is your favorite module you've worked on and why? For me, I definitely think it would be reeling rods, or what is now lib-hooked entity. That one I went on such a big, long research phase of how you run commands on an entity that you've hooked with a fishing rod, which feels like it should be easy, but for some reason in Minecraft it's not. I'll let Blue and Beeps talk about their favorite modules, though.
Yeah, favorite module. That's a difficult question. I've been with this for so long that I don't really have a favorite, to be honest. If you'd ask me, first, just because of the fun factor, it would be Phantom Scarecrows. It's a module where you can make a scarecrow that shoots. It's basically a rocket launcher to shoot down phantoms. No one likes phantoms, and it makes pretty fireworks when the phantoms die, so, it's fun.
Yeah, so my favorite module is probably Vibro, which is an expansion to Metallurgy. So that one, I didn't make Metallurgy, but I made an expansion pack. So that was fun to work on. It was fun because I was able to just take one small idea that I had and just turn it into a small part of a module. So let's move on to the next question. Can anyone suggest new modules for Gamemode4? Very quick answer is yes. We have a public Discord and a GitHub. Both are linked on our website, gm4.co. And anyone can suggest new modules. And oftentimes, if a developer becomes inspired by that, they will just implement it. But many times, when someone has a new module, they can also just submit a PR on GitHub, and then we'll review it, and then it can get merged.
Okay, I'll take the next one. Do you have ideas on how you decide what to put in the base module? What do you put inside the base module? That is actually a really good question. So there are two competing thoughts here. For one, you want to make the base module as small as possible because you want to leave the player the freedom, ideally, to choose which expansion packs they want to install. Modularization, after all, right? The player should have the choice what they want to install. But for example, if you look at Metallurgy, Metallurgy includes some of the custom enchantments, Shamir. Some of them are just included, and you can remove them if you know a bit about modules and know how to delete a certain folder and edit some functions, but they are just included. The reason why we do that is the following. If you just package a base module without any actual content, then why should the player install it? Some player will install it and be like, I've installed this, but nothing happens. It doesn't have anything to do. Why does it exist? We don't want that to happen. So we always bundle some base functionality in the base module. This is usually stuff that we think is pretty basic, not too, how would you say, not too dangerous, or it doesn't have the potential to make someone rage. So for example, in metallurgy, that is diffuse, which diffuses creepers. There is a sort of fortune thing, that sort of stuff. But we would never put something in which makes people want to consider not using the module. Another example is apple trees. We have this one module that turns oak trees into actual apple trees. Well, there are special trees which grow apples and so on. And the apple trees module is technically a library. So we've made coded apple trees, then we noticed, hey, it would be kind of nice to have a base module that just allows you to make fruiting trees, so trees that bear fruit, for example, apples or golden apples. So we then took apple trees apart, turned the base into a library. So library is something a player will never have to interface with. Our build system just integrates it. And we then turned the apple trees module into just a definition of two things. And one is just an apple tree, which grows normal apples. And the other one is a golden apple tree, which grows golden apples very slowly over time. And those two are just bundled in one thing. We have, usually in Gamemode4, we have big discussions within the staff team, so to say, so people who contribute regularly. And at the end of that discussion, we came to the conclusion that golden apple trees are rare enough and not game-changing enough that they aren't controversial. So they are just bundled in with the apple trees module. So when you download apple trees, not only do you get normal apple trees, but also golden apple trees. It didn't make sense for us to put that in its own module, the golden apple trees.
Yeah, so the next question is, what kind of effect do you think modular design has on the learning journey for someone new to data pack making? This one I am actually quite a bit more recent to compared to Beeps and Blue. They've been doing this much longer than I have. But this is technically how I started making data packs. Well, I mean, actually, I started ripping apart vanilla tweaks packs to figure out how they work. But then I started making my own in the same sort of style of modular packs. And it ended up being very nice to have these sort of bite-sized projects that weren't small. It was great for learning because you can kind of pick up something small, make it, and then move on to the next thing. And each one you grow your experience without having to accumulate the technical debt of having massive amounts of things that were made whenever you were much more inexperienced.
Yeah, next question is, what kind of effect do you think modular design has on... Wait, no, that's the wrong one. How do you handle maintaining older modules that were created by no longer active members? That happens quite a lot. Gamemode4 is really old. We started in 2014. I think the first steps were made by Sparks in very early 2014. It was like around Christmas. I joined then in February. And since then, people have joined Gamemode4, people have left Gamemode4. And of course, you are left with these orphaned modules. That can create a problem, but that especially creates a problem when the orphaned module is a big one, if it has this monolithic structure. When you have a very modular approach, like with metallurgy, you have all these tiny little add-ons, it's very easy. A developer leaves, but there will be someone on the team who has some interest, or someone in the Gamemode4 sphere of influence, so to say, who has some interest in those modules, and just updates them. It's very approachable because it's tiny bite-sized content. You have a code base consisting of a couple of files if you know the general Gamemode4 rules, so to say. So if you know a bit about our pipelines, if you know a bit about our coding conventions and so on, it's very easy to pick up. Where we run into problems is with big module. So for example, let's say Orbis. We have had a module that modifies world generation ever since probably 1.12. So that was way before world generation was a thing datapacks could do. We had a module that changed the world. It put icy caves under icy biomes, sandstone caves under deserts, and so on. It was a big thing, but after Sparks got less active because real life got the better of them, we kind of got left without a dev on that, and it took a while to find someone who would rework it. Again, the best way to prevent that is to modularize your data pack. So you make it into smaller bits. We ended up doing that with Orbis. It got split into smaller packs and was then rewritten, and it was a team effort once again. So some people helped out with building of structures, some people helped out with coding one of the parts, and some other people of the other part. That's very important. When you have something like Tauber, the next step for Tauber Cauldrons is to modularize it. I've been planning on doing that for a while now, and I need to get to it. Because if Tauber stays like this and I get more busy in real life, then that's the end of Tauber Cauldrons. And at Gamemode4, we have a high standard in maintaining packs for a very long time, even if it's a bit painful sometimes.
Okay, next question. Vanilla Tweaks and Gamemode4, which are both modular, have custom websites to download the modules. How could hosting websites like Modrinth and Smith evolve to accommodate modular projects? I think the biggest thing that hosting websites could do to support modular projects are things like what some people would call data packs, similar to a mod pack, but with data packs. I know Smith is already working on this with bundles. I think they're still in the works, and maybe they'll be publicly released at some point. But yeah, that's one way that could accommodate modular projects. I don't know if that's on the Modrinth timeline, but yeah, that's one thing. And then
Maybe one thing to add there. With modular packs like Vanilla Tweaks or Gamemode4, a picker is very important. Multiple. It's easier if you have a nice launcher that allows you to do it, but the Vanilla Tweaks website, for example, and our website, we have pickers where you can easily select multiple. And if you want to run a big modular data pack collection like us, you need to have someone on the team who can code a website to do that. Until those public websites like Modrinth catch up and have a multi-picker like that.
yeah. Okay, next question. Your modules are often runtime aware. What techniques do you use in both technical and design of your modules to be data driven at runtime? So the short answer is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. The long answer is use a lot of data storage and function tags. So I talked about the guidebook a lot earlier. This one is the biggest runtime aware module. It kind of goes into the next question. How do you use Lantern Load? This is one of the biggest things that we use. Lantern Load is a way to detect if modules are installed and then update our runtime based on that. So what we do, I'll explain it with Guidebook. Guidebook has its initial load function, which will, after every module is loaded via Lantern Load, it will run a function tag which every other module has to summon and set up its data storage. So that's how we get our modules, specifically Guidebook, to be runtime aware. It's a lot of function tags. It's using libraries like Lantern Load to detect module installation and data storage to store all the data.
I have to type in my name every time I want to spotlight. Do you use Lantern Load? If not, why? If yes, why? Yes, we do use Lantern Load. Gamemode4. I don't have any data to back this up, but I think Gamemode4 was probably one of the first hacks that used it. The person who makes it, Lou, is pretty tightly integrated into the Gamemode4 community. So yes, we use it. Why do we use it? We want compatibility with other modules. So Gamemode4 was built for compatibility, not just with itself. We need the compatibility with ourselves, of course, because people will install multiple modules, but we also want compatibility with other data packs. We don't want to be the ones where you install a data pack and suddenly everything breaks because, I don't know, they put something weird into the tick function, or you can do a lot of weird stuff if you don't use lantern loads to make every data pack in your world break by one data pack. Gamemode4 is very much interested in keeping that intercompatibility between modules, between data packs, so they don't break each other. Importantly, of course, we can't have features work with other data packs. We could, but it's a lot of work and designing for something unknown. But we are very much interested in keeping things working together, or not breaking other stuff. And Gamemode4 is also very performance aware. So when function first became a thing, lantern node was basically the way to go for us to schedule our regular startup sequence, to install the modules. We put a lot of effort in optimizing our stuff too. Some would probably call us a bit obsessive about performance at Gamemode4. I think I'm not sure whether it wasn't the other Gamemode4 talk held by Jones and Curious, where they called us the data pack module guys from Gamemode4 a bit too obsessive about performance. And that is true, but we have to be, because in contrast to maps, we don't know in which environment the Gamemode4 modules these data packs are run. You install this in a world, and maybe someone already installed a data pack on their world that, I don't know, fills a chunk every tick with stone blocks and then other blocks and then air and so on. So you don't know. We have to prepare for the worst.
To take the next question, what are your thoughts on balancing useful tools like Beat and making it more difficult for outsiders to contribute if they're unfamiliar with the tools? Actually, we have a lot of documentation in our repository on how to get started. And for the most part, you don't even need to interact with the boot pipeline if you are making or contributing to a module, because each module is in its own folder, and you can just put in basically a regular data pack and the pipeline will load that separately. But I mean, for the most part, how we manage it is documentation.
And that documentation grows as new people join Gamemode4, because, I mean, everyone here who has worked on software projects before knows that writing documentation is kind of a thing that you kind of forget to do every now and then. But whenever someone new joins Gamemode4, they usually trip over something, and then we write documentation for that. Maybe that's not a good practice, but we are all just human. Okay, next question. What are your thoughts about balancing... No, that we just had that. Do you still do module dev streams? Module dev streams? I'm surprised someone else here remembers them. Back before COVID, there were almost weekly dev streams, I think always Thursday evening EU time, where we worked on stuff on stage. We had a stream going. I think it was first on Twitch, then later on YouTube, then later on Discord. No, the short answer is no, we don't do them anymore. Why do we no longer do them? The problem is that these streams, when they were held before COVID, that was one before MC function became a thing, and then it was as we were converting from command block contraptions to MC function. If nowadays you do a coding stream, you no longer need to show a world reel. There's nothing to see in the world. You just look at nothing until the changes are pushed and then you quickly test a feature. And it's rather boring. Back in the day with command block contraptions, it was rather fun because you added command blocks and then you tested something and then you added command blocks and you had to recoil your modules and so on. That's just no longer a thing. And watching a code editor is boring. Watching the world where nothing happens until you reload the latest changes is also kind of boring. You'd watch a code editor. Okay, maybe some people would enjoy that, but it's no longer as attractive to us, to be honest.
Okay, and our final question. Different types of content may fit more or less modular design. How is this in your experience, and how does this affect what you create and how you create it? I think the best way to answer this is I'm not sure. Blue, do you have an answer for this?
I do have an answer. Yeah, so the modular design mostly limits us in a way that we need to think about compatibility. Not how content fits, but compatibility. We ourselves, we need to be compatible with ourselves, just like I said, but also with other data packs. But we are forced to have compatibility, else we're not compatible with ourselves. So one thing that limited us for a long time, and that's honestly still a problem, is that Mojang doesn't have a way to merge loot tables. If two data packs define a loot table, then whichever data pack gets loaded first has the go at it, and the other data pack, well, suck it up. It's over. There's Weld, which you can use to merge things together, but the player has to actively do that, and for that the player needs to be aware of it. And let's be honest, a lot of players don't even know about Weld, which is kind of sad. I wish that was a default feature on like Modran. But that limits us, of course. So we stray away from using loot tables. For example, metallurgy. I think nowadays, does metallurgy change the loot table for the ores for TNT? No, right? Does it?
Metallurgy does change the loot tables for stone, andesite, granite, and diorite.
Yeah.
But we do include weld rules so that if you weld it, it will properly work with other data packs that use weld.
Yeah, but for a long time, so basically metallurgy changes when you blow up rocks, stone, for example, you have a chance to get an ore out, like a special ore. I think bismuth in the case of stone. Don't count, nice name, he will flame us for that. It's geologically on shaky ground, so to say. But for a long time, we didn't use the loot table there. Instead, for a long time, we tracked the TNT entity, and when it blew up, we then tagged the item entities nearby to then spawn in extra item entities, which was performance-wise speaking way, way worse than using a loot table. But we wanted to go that way because Weld wasn't a thing yet, and we wanted to keep this this compatibility between data packs. Is that the question answered? I hope that's the question answered. Well, that was the last question, it seems. I think we're also out of time. So what I want to leave you with is hopefully we inspired you a bit. When you start your new data pack that you plan to start probably tomorrow or whenever you have time, think about going modular. If you go monolithic at first and then decide to do modular later, you end up like Zauber Cauldrons, where you have a monolith and you never get around to actually changing it into a modular pack. But whenever you start your next pack, think of us, strike the modular approach. You don't have to go full on in, you don't have to build 20 pipelines, but the modular approach is probably an advantage for you in the long term. If you want some inspiration, check out Gamemode4, and if you want to help with Gamemode4, contributors are always welcome. You find us at gm4.co. Get kidnapped like Rankas. Thank you for your attention.
And thank you, the presenters today. This has been Gamemode4.
So that's the point where we close the curtains, huh? Dramatic.